Where else am I? Oh, Jamel Hill. Jamel Hill, she be pissing me off, bro. I really like Jamel Hill, and I think that's why she get under my skin so much when she says shit like this.
A lot of cold nights, I will pray my plight will fade. Now I just embrace shit, I'm still stuck in my ways. Got draft saved in the tuck that won't see the light of day. That's nicer than all the hype that y'all claim is the wave. Won't waste my...
So she was tweeting this past week. This amount says, I have increasingly found that many black men just want better access to patriarchy. They don't actually want to dismantle it.
Didn't she get bodied by Stan Van Gundy on that too?
Well, here's my problem. Here's my problem with this. I have seen a lot this year of black women telling black men what they are doing wrong, while also at the same time talking about black men criticizing black women on public forums, or not standing up and protecting them in public forums, right? But it seems so common that black women feel it necessary and okay to have these kind of discussions on open platforms, but will never allow the same to come back to them, right? We will never allow black men to get up here and drag black women and nobody gets any type of flack or canceling or attacks for it. They'll never happen. But black women are allowed to say that, black men can't be faithful monogamous men because of slavery, or black men don't protect black women, they want to support the patriarchy. I'm not saying that there aren't individuals that do that, and her point could be completely valid. My point is, are you having that conversation in the community, or are you spewing it on Twitter for white liberals to eat up as another piece of ammo against black men? Another reason to discredit black men or to criticize black men? Are you taking conversations that maybe you should be having inside the community and putting them out for public consumption for everyone to comment on? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Making faces, would you care to rebuttal?
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. I can find some validity in the last point, in the latter half of your argument, where you say, is this something is she just spewing for like white liberal media to eat up, and versus having it, a conversation in the community, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
However, I think that's what makes, Twitter, a good-ish, Twitter is semi-problematic, but I mean,
we'll get to that later.
right. But I think that's what, makes Twitter valuable is this is something that then disperses and allows to have meaningful conversation. Because
the floor. It opens up the floor for a lot.
it really does. Because is there some validity in what she's saying? I definitely think absolutely. I definitely do think that you have, black men who do X, Y, and Z in order to do what they need to do to protect themselves and support the patriarchy. Now, I think sometimes, women talk shit on Twitter. I've definitely talked shit on Twitter. You know what I mean? But then again, I think it's important to recognize people just making comments, stuff that's fake versus real life. So yeah, blah, 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 black men cheat, all that stuff. We literally know that's for fun, for jokes. Yeah, you can be with people who cheat, people don't cheat, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel again, if you're in a relationship with someone, that's a whole different conversation. That broad blanketed statement goes away. Now, however, though, I do think that there are black men who don't protect black women. If you want to get into the Tory Meg thing, there's so many, conversations that we could have where even protecting black women goes beyond, not shooting them when they get out of the car trying to walk away from a conversation.
It doesn't have to be anything that egregious. You can just look at Terry Crews, and that's another example of not protecting black women. I guess my point is that I could point to equal examples of black women doing the same thing, moving up the patriarchal ladder by ignoring the needs or supporting policies or ideologies that don't support their community, right? I.e. Candace Owens, i.e. people like Katrina Pierce, i.e. Even Kamala Harris to a certain degree, right? She's made concessions that were detrimental to her community for political gain, right? But we can't have that conversation on a national scale without being called a Trump supporter, or you want Trump to win, or you just hate black women, or let us have our first black woman vice president. Like, we can't have these conversations openly and honestly about black women who support patriarchy or support systemic racism even, right? We can't have these conversations when it's flipped. And I'm open to have these conversations about these. Daniel Cameron is another one. We can do that. But we just need to do it across the board. It can't always be, well, we need to talk about this and we need to have an open forum when it's just about black men.
I think, though, the problem where having these conversations and stuff is you have to think about the language that you use when you have these conversations.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I definitely think we can all note that Kamala does have a track record that is semi-problematic. However, you know what I mean? Do we, there has been conversation, do we feel like she essentially maybe made some of these concessions to get to where she's at now to then do the reverse? If so, it's still super problematic.
Why am I to trust you? If you've made those
Right,
concessions
no.
to advance yourself before, now you have the power. You have what it is that you were looking
Right.
for. So why am I to trust you now that you have what you want?
Right. Which is totally fair. And I think it's fair, again, that we do have those conversations and we do talk about black women, except Candace Owens, because boo, like, she's not really ever coming back in my book. However, I think that, again, it's like the language that we use to have these conversations about black women and towards black women.
Mhm.
When the conversation, I mean, it's like any conversation you have with someone. Once it becomes like, like if the language is deemed as like attackful, et cetera, then it's just like, well, shoot, like, are you attacking her? Like, what are your language is inferring that, otherwise, that you're not, trying to have this conversation, you're just trying to attack her for her.
No, absolutely. And then again, that's another thing about Twitter or internet platforms when you're having these discussions, because it's like an outrage mill,
Right.
right? Like, people aren't there to have thoughtful conversation. They're there to combat. It's a gladiator
Right.
sport almost. They're fighting you just for the sake of fighting you. So is Twitter the best place to say something like this? Knowing what kind of reaction you're going to get from it, knowing that it's not going to reach the ears that you feel like it needs to reach, and the only thing it's going to do is spark the amount of outrage that it did on Twitter.
But however, in reverse, look at the conversation we're now having.
I feel like that's a conversation that we could have well before Jamel Hill ever came out here and said that black men don't, want to tear down the patriarchy. Because think about what kind of statement you're making when you're saying that. You're generalizing our entire being. You're in all black men, or she said many black men, excuse me. Many black men, just a sweeping generalization of black men attacking the very structures that have oppressed us for 400 years. That's what you're saying. And whether you actually believe that or not, that is the impression that you're giving off. So again, is Twitter the best place for you to have this conversation? Plenty of places you can go do work and speak and hold these forums without getting on Twitter and saying something salacious like this.
Like a
Because
podcast.
if this was, who would be the heir apparent of somebody like Jamel Hill? If Lamont Hill came out and was like, black women should really stop supporting white feminist agendas because they always seem to leave them behind and push other people's social issues above black people's, right? You say something like that, where's Lamont Hill gonna end up? Drug all through internet, canceled, right? But Jamel Hill and Lonnie Love and all of these different commentators are able to say these kind of things and be protected by other black women. So I'm saying, if you're expecting us to stand up and to say something about the Daniel Cameron, say something about the Tory Lanez, say something about the Terry Cruzes of the world, we're expecting you to do the same. This protection thing, if black women are our rock, they have to be our rock. You have to be able to support us the same way that you want to be supported. It cannot be a one-way street. Cannot be a one-way street.
I'm sorry, but I find that comment to be super problematic because it's like, black women do support black men. 100%.
But is that being supportive of black men?
I think it's trying to hold you accountable.
So then what is it when it's the reverse? Are we not allowed to hold black women accountable for things that are problematic coming from them?
Here's the thing, like, no shade, but I feel like y'all are also kind of sensitive. It's just like
Black men are sensitive?
men in general. I'm
Okay.
just gonna blanket this as a man statement.
Okay.
However, I think that when you say, okay, you need to do better, you need to do right by us, it's like, she's generalizing me and blah 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 and all these things, and it just becomes a spectacle. Like it's, you know, there's drama.
I agree it becomes a spectacle, but that's why we shouldn't be doing it on Twitter.
Okay, maybe, but at the same time though, we still should be having these conversations. So
Absolutely.
if it's not, you know, a conversation that I just have in my day-to-day life, you know, or think about the environment I'm in, or think about the people I'm surrounded by. Maybe this isn't something that, like, I'm sure, I know I talk to my friends about this. I'm sure, obviously, y'all talk to each other about this. But, like, what if I just, you know, I'm in a situation where I have younger brothers or sisters, or I'm not surrounded by my peers enough to have this conversation? That type of tweet, you know, it makes me like, oh, well, maybe I should have this type of conversation more. So that's what I'm saying, like, you know, I get what you're saying, but like, you know, with Twitter being a catch-22, but however, I think it's beneficial because it then extends, you know, more advanced dialogue. And then again, going back to this whole, you know, black women being our rock thing, blah, 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 all this stuff, you know, you always, if you go to a protest, wherever you go, you are always going to see black women.
Absolutely.
You are when black women started the BLM, like, you know, BLM, all this stuff, like, you're always started the Me Too movement, you are always going to see, you know, black women offering support, showing love, and being strong for black men.
Yeah.
But it's like whenever we ask for it in return of any type, it's like, ugh, it's almost like we're asking too much.
But see, when you say that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh. You're trying to get in.
I was just gonna say, to both of your points, I just feel like if we're looking for certain things from black men, for example, Twitter is like the worst place to go because
Twitter's a
niggas
cesspool
on
of
Twitter are
trash.
just going to give you bullshit and be
Right.
sensitive, like you said.
Right.
Like it's like the worst place you can ask for a discussion like that. But to your point, that starts the discussion in real life.
Right. And I'm
It's
not
just
going,
here now.
because Twitter, it's like what, 160 characters, like, and people want to make a think piece out of 160 characters.
And everybody wants to have their two
2
cents.
cents, right? And then
they
you
might not need
can't
to.
get it in context, and then people want to leave these voice memos down. I'm like, I don't want to listen to your voice either.
I can't give voice memos.
Oh, right, it's weird. So I mean, I
I'll
think
talk about it later.
I totally
Sexy
get
stuff.
your point, and I just think that, you know, it is a catch-22 with Twitter again, but I think then I'm thankful to some of her statements, even though they can definitely be problematic, but they do then inspire like real life conversation, like amongst your peers who matter, versus like, you know, the randos on Twitter who just like aren't really talking about shit.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with her premise. There are too many examples of it for me to disagree with it. But much like, you know, conversations that like we brought up with oh girl, who was her name? Lonnie Love.
Yeah.
Right? Much like that conversation, that is not something that, number one, I felt like it was communicated incorrectly. And then number two, it's not something that you should be putting out for white liberal consumption. Because anything that we say on public forums, they take and they apply it to their own implicit biases, and it just compounds the thoughts that they already have. It's not doing us any good for us to be having these type of conversations with people that they don't apply to, is I guess my point. But no, I agree 100% with the premise. I just hated the delivery.
Thanks for watching another Back of the Bus Squad episode. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe.
Want to check out another episode related to this, go ahead and click that video to the left.
And if you want to catch up on some of our other episodes, make sure you click the playlist below.